Welcome to Alan Skorsky Reports. I'm Alan Skorsky. In just 1 week, we will commemorate the 23rd anniversary of 9/11. For many American Jews and Israelis, it's been 9/11 since last October 7th. This past week, Israel and Jews around the world were shocked with grief over the brutal execution of 6 hostages held by Hamas, including American-Israeli Hersh Goldberg-Polin. To add insult to injury and pour salt into an already open wound, President Biden said that Bibi Netanyahu hasn't done enough to make a deal with Hamas. And there are new reports that a President Harris, God forbid, would be open to a new direction in U.S. policy towards Israel. Add all of this to the UK's suspension of certain arms to Israel and the International Criminal Court of Justice threatening to issue arrest warrants for Bibi Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. If there is anyone who can make sense of any of this, or at least add clarification to what we are witnessing, it is today's guest and good friend, Ruthie Blum. Ruthie is a former advisor to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. She is an award-winning columnist and senior contributing editor at JNS, and she is also the co-host of the exciting podcast, Israel Undiplomatic, with Ambassador Mark Regev. Ruthie, it's great to have you back again. So I opened up with a brief monologue.
It's great to see you. It's great to see you.
So thank you. So again, I can ask you a million questions, but I know you've got a lot to say just based on what I opened up with. So why don't you go from there, and then we'll just have a conversation about everything that's going on.
Well, I can start by saying that I have to argue with one statement you made, and that was that I am here to make sense of what you were describing, and it is so senseless that it is hard to make sense of it, if that makes any sense. You know, everything you're describing, it's appalling, but I have to say not surprising, given the administration in Washington, the nature of the administration in Washington. You know, let's not forget that before this war broke out, President Biden didn't even invite Netanyahu to the White House. He was snubbing him. Okay, this was before October 7th.
Right.
Now, and given the, let's say, the character of the Democratic Party that's become more and more radicalized, it's not surprising that Israel was not high on their list of friends, let's put it that way.
Right.
So when the war broke out, many Israelis who considered the Biden administration probably hostile were so pleasantly surprised that Biden actually came to Israel and he said, "We've got your back," and all that. And during that initial phase, even though, you know, he was saying, "I've got your back," I really did have the feeling that he had our back in order to stab us in it.
Right.
And that sort of panned out shortly thereafter. It took a while, but basically, from early on in the war, there were 2 main messages. One was, don't kill any Palestinian civilians. And I say that I should put air quotes there, because Gaza is filled with, it's not just with terrorists, but many of the civilians took part in the October 7th massacre. And many who did not actually participate, didn't breach the border and rape and maim and the murder and kidnap, cheered when the abducted Israelis were brought into Gaza, many of them bloodied, many corpses, and they were cheering and throwing rocks, etc. So, you know, I don't know how many innocent civilians there are there, but in any case, Biden was conveying 2 messages, and both indicated that, you know, what he really wanted us was to lose the war or stop the war, and the second message after "don't kill any innocent Palestinians" was, don't go into Rafah. That came a little bit later. Do not go. And then, you know, to top it all off, he withheld weapon shipments. And by the way, I think it's important to stress that one point that people don't usually emphasize, and that is that this isn't a gift. We purchased those weapons, okay? You know, that's one thing. Now, so everything that's been going on has indicated that the Democrats, and especially headed by Biden and now by Kamala Harris, it will be headed by Kamala Harris, really, first of all, they have a dim view of the West in general, certainly of Israel, but not just of Israel, of America, of Western power, of, so, and the Biden administration was trying to get back to the Iran nuclear deal. Right. Now, let's not forget that Hamas is an Iranian proxy,
right,
as is Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. So, I saw that as a very tricky situation. And I have to say that if I had any criticism of Netanyahu, it was that he was catering too much to Biden's demands and insistence.
So let me ask you a question, because many Americans like myself, we are naive and we live in our own fantasy about Israel and U.S. relations. But and you were an advisor to Bibi, and to me, listen, I grew up in the 80s when he was the ambassador to the UN and then to the US, and he was on Ted Koppel every night. I remember him from when I was in college. Israel knows, they know who Joe Biden is. They know that Barack Obama was an ideologue who believed that just as America has wronged blacks and owes them, he believed that Israel has wronged the Palestinians. I've always viewed Biden as this politician. You go and he doesn't have any core beliefs, but we know that he appointed and nominated many, many anti-Israel players to his cabinet. When you and your team of advisors are working with Bibi, do you have a plan? Like, we know that we can go this far, and then Biden's going to turn on us, because you follow U.S. politics and you're all smart, and you're all smarter than Biden anyhow. So when you guys are strategizing, to what point Biden is going to be able to go, and then when he's going to stab you in the back. So it could not have been a surprise when he did stab you in the back, because we all saw it coming here in America.
Well, first of all, let me say that I was not an inner circle advisor. It's not that I sat with Netanyahu and was privy to such discussions of the kind that you're saying, the kind you're bringing up, which is to say, how far can he get with Biden? None of that. Okay. My function had to do with writing, helping write speeches, things like that. It didn't have to do with policy. I was not involved in policy or deciding whether you could or could not piss off President Biden. Right. When I say that I had criticism of him for caving too much, right, it was easy for me because, it's easy for me to be an armchair critic. Right. And, but I will say that Netanyahu, despite his reputation around the world for being a genocidal maniac, is actually extremely careful, right, measured. Yeah. He hates going to war. It's just the opposite of what people say about him. Which is why I think he's the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history, because he really is a leader. And part of being a leader is knowing when to push and when to pause. Let's put it that way. This situation was so horrible, though, October 7th, that there was really nothing like it. It's unprecedented in Israeli history, because though we've had many wars, and we certainly have lived with terrorism, both from Hamas and from Fatah and from Hezbollah, and we've lived with rockets. This was something much more up close and personal. This was an invasion of thousands of Hamas terrorists and other Gazans just having a field day, raping, going on rampages, torturing. It was something that you still can't wrap your head around, right, no matter how much you know about it, no matter how many details come out, no matter how many video clips you've watched. And so, at the moment, I think it was, as I said, I thought that Netanyahu was being too careful with Biden, but maybe I was wrong. Maybe he had no choice and he was trying desperately. He thought in the beginning, I think, that there was legitimacy. Israel had legitimacy to go to war after what we suffered.
Right.
That legitimacy wore off pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. And now it's wearing off inside Israel among certain sectors.
So here's like another thing, and I say this again as a Jew and as an American. I can say that I can't sleep at night and that we daven for Israel, and that I feel the pain to the extent that I can feel it. But I'm not a family member of a hostage. I do have family and stepfamily and friends who've lost their young ones in Gaza. I can feel that pain, but it isn't the same. So on the one hand, to me, again, I'm a big Bibi fan. Doesn't mean he's perfect. He's still a politician, but he's still, to me, he's always been a leader who's one of the best for his people. And then you've got these 100,000 or so protesters. I don't know who they really are. There is some merit to those who say, you know what, we can't sleep another night. We need the hostages back. And to them is, get them back at all costs. We'll worry next time. So both sides have something that they're saying that makes sense, but you can't do it both ways. And as far as Joe Biden concerns, you know what he's caring about? This is his legacy. He wants to be able to say that I ended the war. He's not trying to do that with Ukraine and Russia. He's not trying to do it anywhere else, but when it comes to Israel and Gaza, he wants to say that he's the one who ended the war there. And then, of course, he gets his Michigan voters back.
Well, what's sad about that is that if you're talking about a legacy, I'm not so sure at this moment Biden really is all there enough to know about what kind of legacy he's leaving. But to the extent that he does, wouldn't it be a better legacy to say, I'm responsible for ending that war in an Israeli victory and a victory of the West against the Islamic Republic of Iran? That would be a legacy.
Not as a Democrat. For a Republican,
No,
yes. Trump,
not
yes. But not for a
I want to make
Democrat.
a point about what you said about being an American Jew.
Yeah.
It's true. You're not living in Israel, and it's true, and you almost apologize for weeping for the hostages and their families and the war. You don't have to apologize for that. That's what the state of Israel is. It's for the Jewish people. It's the Jewish nation. I was going to add to that you have a different problem, okay? And your problem is that October 7th unleashed the kind of anti-Semitism in the United States that I never believed ever I would see.
Right.
And when anybody said, no, anti-Semitism is going to come to America the way it was creeping into Europe.
Yeah.
I said, no, America is too much of a melting pot. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Well, I was wrong. And sadly, what unleashed it, interesting. It's very interesting. You would think, just sort of your logic might say, that anti-Semitism would be unleashed when Israel does something bad or something like that. Here, Israel was a victim of the worst massacre, the worst slaughter of Jews since the Holocaust. And it unleashed, before any Israeli boots were on the ground in Gaza, on October 8th already, when Hezbollah joined in by launching missiles into northern Israel, America went on fire with anti-Semitism. It was like, okay, now we can let our Jew hatred out. And not only among radical activists, like Students for Justice in Palestine types.
Right.
Not only professors at universities, Ivy League schools.
But these are all Marxists. These are all Marxists.
They're all Marxists, and it's the marriage of the far left with the Islamists. Okay, It's a weird marriage because the leftists, all they talk about is climate change and transgenderism and abortion, all the things that they'd be tarred and feathered for in any Islamist country. Okay, it's kind of a funny marriage, but
it happened today. There was when I think on Instagram that there was a rally for Palestine, and Palestinian or Muslim activists told Queers for Palestine, get out of here.
Right, of course.
Yeah. So again, I mean, for us,
Sure.
like, as Douglas Murray likes to say, uh, either Queers for Palestine or Neturei Karta, it's like chickens for Kentucky Fried
Right,
Chicken.
right, for
But
Kentucky Fried
Neturei
Chicken.
Karta, they have their own insanity. But Queers
That's
for
true.
Palestine, that really, again, that just shows that their loyalty to leftism and Marxism precedes everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also what scares me now, again, with Biden, again, he's got a 50-year history of always being squishy. He always went onto the safe side until it wasn't safe anymore. With Kamala Harris, she has expressed sympathy for Palestinianism. And I don't say Palestinians, I say Palestinianism, which is a mindset. It's a mindset built by a myth that started in 1964 that there was ever a real Palestinian entity. And now she's hired, and I wrote the names down here, that she's hired an Arab American outreach director, Brenda Abdelal, who says that
Yeah.
Zionists control politics, and Elon Goldenberg for her Jewish outreach guy,
Yeah.
who supports
That's right.
Iran, the Iran nuclear deal, and is also strongly endorsed by J Street. And both the
Yep.
Harrison Walz ticket were endorsed by J Street, they were endorsed by CARE, and they were endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America. So I understand, or I don't have, but the stupid Jews in America, you know what? They stand for nothing. Their loyalty is to the Democrats, period. It pains me for the leftists in Israel because, again, Haaretz, again, it's a filthy trash newspaper. And I get, their publications, but it pains me that the Israeli left, however much you dislike Bibi Netanyahu, you got to love your own people because you saw what happened on October 7th. At least let that be a wake-up call to you. Whether you like Bibi or not is a different story.
Well, some Israelis did have a wake-up call. In fact, the kibbutzim in the south, many of those, the residents there, were real peace now nicks,
Right.
okay? Serious ones and devoted ones who all they wanted to do was make friends with their Gaza neighbors, and they were helping them and bringing them to medical treatment and giving them work,
Sure.
and some of those, the residents, I mean, the ones who survived that horrible slaughter, right? Some of them actually say that they were horrified and they no longer have those politics of peace, 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 and everything is, but the far left doesn't wake up from things like that. What the far left does is to, like Haaretz, is to take an event like that and fit it into their narrative that already blames. Now, it's blaming the state of Israel. It's certainly blaming Netanyahu, but even if it weren't Netanyahu, it's blaming the Jewish people for having a state. It's blaming Israel for the Palestinians not having a state. And so everything fits into that context, you see. So it is, well, of course they committed that massacre because they are frustrated and they don't have enough money and they don't have enough work permits, which of course is nonsense. You know that the billions of dollars that have been poured into Gaza over the years, dollars, euros, and shekels, mind you. Do you realize that every Gazan could own a villa with a swimming pool and a tennis court with all that money?
Yeah.
So, it isn't that they didn't have money. It's that they are run by a terrorist organization that raises the children to, to believe that their highest goal is to annihilate Israel, to kill Jews, and to martyr themselves in the process.
Now, I want to come back also to the 6 hostages who were just executed. Remember going back, I think it was in June, when one of Israel's special elite units, and God, we get such nachas from them, when they went into Gaza, masquerading as Gazans, and they were able to rescue a number of hostages. And then again, a few weeks ago, when they rescued a Bedouin.
Yep.
I mean, again, I knew. So I don't know where Israel goes from here, but I knew at this point Hamas may have been humiliated once, maybe twice, but moving forward, the instructions are going to be, and we saw it right here, if you smell any Jewish, Jews coming forward, execute the hostages. So even moving forward now, in your opinion, what is Israel's next move?
No, I have a different perspective on why they executed those hostages. And I believe it isn't because they saw us rescue those four and then the Bedouin. It is because they see the street protests in Israel. They hear pressure from everywhere. They hear even the Israeli defense minister and the Israeli chief of staff of the army. And Sinwar knows Hebrew and he knows Israeli culture.
Yep.
And he knows very well that if he sits it out, that before you know it, the Israelis will be dancing in the streets and screaming, bring them home, and now, and now. And he was encouraged by that. He was not encouraged. He wasn't, that's a Western mindset to say, okay, we got closer to them, so they executed the hostages. If there hadn't been these protests and there hadn't been this bring them home now, and it's all Bibi's fault, which, by the way, the IDF found a Hamas document that actually spells out that strategy. Make sure everybody blames Netanyahu, and put pressure on the defense minister Gallant, and release hostage videos for propaganda purposes. It's worked. The sad part is it's been working. And I won't blame anybody but Hamas for the executions. But what I will say is, for months, people on my side have been saying, cool it a little bit. Okay, of course we all want the hostages home, but that's not how you get them home. First of all, we need to win the war. We need to go in there. We need to rescue as many as we can. Bibi already made a deal and got several hostages out.
Right.
We already destroyed many or most of the Hamas battalions. To keep putting up more pressure and blaming Bibi, taking to the streets to say that he's the murderer. Well, of course Hamas is starting to execute them, because what Hamas is saying, okay, Biden, okay, Qatar and Egypt, all you got to do, if you don't force Bibi to let us stay in power and let Israel lose the war, every day that goes by, we're just going to kill another hostage.
Right. So it's funny you say that, because the Wall Street Journal just came out with an opinion saying that Sinwar and Hamas are laughing that the West, here, they execute 6 hostages in cold blood, and Bibi's getting blamed for it.
Exactly.
So again, this has always been Hamas's strategy. They never cared. For them, every dead Israeli or every dead civilian is another propaganda victory for them, then gets translated here in America. And as you said, now Biden is saying that Netanyahu hasn't done enough, even though the record shows that both Blinken and the CIA said that Bibi has made concessions. He's been willing to deal. So then here's one of my last questions I want to ask. When there's a negotiation going on, and again, this to me has been also one of the biggest mistakes, and I don't know how you get around it, is that the West, the US, all these major players have elevated Hamas to bring them to the negotiating table. And what a propaganda victory that they have been elevated to the level that they can hold cards with Israel and the United States.
Well, of course they can, because look at who are the mediators. I'm not talking about Biden.
Right.
Qatar is a leading terrorist state sponsor of terrorism and supports Hamas. And Egypt has been allowing the goods and the concrete and the mortars and the rockets to go through the Philadelphia corridor all these years now. Interestingly, I mean, and you don't even need to, it's not rocket science when you hear Egypt being so furious about Israel's demand to monitor the Philadelphia corridor. It's like, wow, now that's interesting. You'd think Egypt would be happy to say, you know what, you're right, we'll help you monitor it. No. Okay, so, and Hamas, you're right, Hamas is sitting there, I mean, Hamas meaning Sinwar, is sitting there laughing. Because, and by the way, he's also laughing because when he was in Israeli prison, he was let out in the Gilad Shalit
I
deal.
remember.
But while he was in Israeli prison, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And a doctor there saved his life by operating successfully on his brain tumor. And guess what? On October 7th, that doctor's nephew was
Was killed.
slaughtered by
Yeah,
Hamas. So, that's who these people are. And that we know. And why anyone in this world is defending them. I know why Qatar is. I know why Egypt is. I know why our enemies are. I know why Iran wants it. Why is the West? Why is America? Why is Britain suddenly saying we're going to
yeah,
withhold arms when Hamas just executed 6 hostages?
right.
What is going on?
So also one of the things, again, I play Monday morning quarterback all the time. In my mind, because Israel did not retaliate for close to a week. And I'm thinking now, of course, looking back, had Israel told the West, you know that we're going to go in there. You've got 72 hours to get our hostages out. You use all your pressure on Iran and everybody else, because if you don't, we're going in and you won't be able to stop us. And I wonder, had they put all the onus on them instead of going in first, if that wouldn't have told Europe, you better make this happen. And then my second follow-up to that is that right now I think I read that there's maybe a $400,000 bounty on Sinwar, which is a joke. I think if they put a $5 million bounty on him, you'd have every Gazan digging to a tunnel to find him themselves.
Yeah, well, that's a good question because, yes, the money issue, the bounty issue, must have been on offer for the last several months. It's hard for me to believe that that wasn't one of the attempts we made. It's hard for me to believe. I don't have inside information. It's hard for me to believe. It's not like, oh, it suddenly occurred to us to offer money for him. Okay. But as to your question about the beginning of the war, when we, actually, here's how you can see that America does not want to be a superpower under any democratic regime.
Right.
And that is that, do you realize that Russia helped get out some of the hostages with Russian citizenship by, do you know, one of them had Russian parents or something, and Russia expedited citizenship for him, and then got him out as part of a Russian deal with Hamas. You realize that America is supposed to be the world's greatest superpower. You would have thought that, the president of the United States would say, you get them all out or else, or
Right.
whatever the or else is. There are many or else's. However, if you look back and you look at the hostage crisis in 1979 with Iran, you look at that. Jimmy Carter said, no, we talk to them and we negotiate with them and we do this and we do that and we do the other thing. America does not went, certainly under Jimmy Carter didn't, but Biden's administration is different from how Jimmy Carter was. This is a group of people, and I say Democrats because, and not, old style Democrats, like Jimmy Carter was an old style Democrat. When he became president, it was like he became a Marxist. I don't know what, a total leftist wuss, but the point is that victory over your enemies and that kind of thing is just not in their lexicon. They don't believe in it.
Right.
They don't. They believe in diplomacy. All right. That's like saying, let me talk to Jack the Ripper and the Boston Strangler and we'll reach an agreement.
Yeah.
It's beyond belief, but we see it. We see it happening again. And I have to tell you, if Kamala Harris wins this election, I really don't know what is going to be the fate of the United States of America. I mean, it's true, Israel, we're worried in Israel, but I got to tell you, the world needs a strong America.
Yeah.
And without us, with the Kamala Harris as president,
we're
That's not a
screwed.
strong America.
And that's not hyperbole. It's not partisanship. If she wins, we're done. That's it. And that's just what's going to happen. Ruthie, it was an honor to see you again. I want to
Alan,
thank you
always
so
a
much
pleasure. Always a pleasure talking to you.
and give my regards to your co-host. Tell him I'm a big fan of his.
I will do so. Actually, I did when we were on our way to tape our podcast
Okay.
this morning. I actually sent him your regards and I told him you said you're a big fan of his.
Okay. Ruthie, thank you so much for joining us today. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. And we will see you on the next episode of Alan Skorsky Reports.
Great.
Okay.